Hello, teachers. We're excited to welcome you to our webinar. As we get started, we have a question to begin as we wait for a few other people to join us. So the question is, for those who are currently teaching, what is one success you have had so far this school year? Please write your ideas in the chat. For those of you who are currently teaching, what is one success you've had so far this school year? Please feel free to share your answers in the chat with us. And if you'd like to, please share your name and where you're from as well. Hello, everybody. Hi, thank you for joining us. For those of you who are just arriving, we have a question for you. If you are currently teaching, what is one success that you've had so far this school year? All right, let's go ahead and get started. So during this webinar, we are going to be talking about how you can set up your language classroom for a successful school year. And we're so glad that you're here to join us.
So who are we? Hello, my name is Chelsea Olsen. I am one of the English Language Fellows, and I am working with the Ministry of Education as well as Fulbright. And as you can see, I am from the state of Michigan in the United States. And I'm really excited to be here with you all.
Hi, my name is Johanna Baiver-Raivo, and I am the English Language Fellow at Universidad de Educación Enrique Guzmán en Valle, also known as Cantuta. I see there's some people here from Chosica, so woot woot for Chosica, and I see people from Venezuela. Welcome, everybody. We're excited to be here in Peru. And I'm from Minnesota, sorry.
Hi, everybody. My name is Laurah Jurca. I am the English Language Fellow at San Marcos, and I am here from Washington, D.C., the capital of the United States.
All right, well, let's get started. So today we are going to talk about setting up your classroom for success in a new year. And to start, we're going to talk about the affective filter and how that relates to language learning, especially in a new school year. And then we'll talk about 3 different ways that you can try to lower the affective filter for your students, including physical space, routines, and classroom climate. So let's get started. So our first topic is affective filter, and we have a picture of a language learner here. Actually, they're learning Spanish, and kind of some thoughts that are going through their mind, and this can kind of represent the idea of the affective filter. So our first question for you all about this is, what causes students stress in a language classroom? So please write your ideas in the chat of things that make students feel stressed when they're learning a language. So again, we're thinking about what are some of the things that cause our students when they are in a classroom. So someone's talking about communication, which can be very stressful, trying to get your meaning across to others. Hello, Romy. We'll wait another moment to see some other ideas. A lack of knowledge, yes. So if you don't know the vocabulary words or the grammar structures or what you're supposed to do, that can be very stressful. Making mistakes, for sure. Language learning is all about making mistakes, and yet we still don't want to do it. Pronunciation is huge, especially in the foreign language setting where they don't get to hear as much of a native speaker's accent. That can be very stressful. And confidence, being forced to speak when you don't want to. Yes, thank you, everybody. So we're going to talk about affective filter. Where does this term come from? So affective filter is actually one of 5 different hypotheses that were popularized by Stephen Krashen. You guys have probably all heard of him. He's a very famous linguist and researcher. His other hypotheses, in case you're curious, are the acquisition learning, natural order, monitor, and comprehensible input. And then the 5th one is the affective filter. And in this situation, in this phrase, affect is actually a noun. So it's relating to the idea of someone's emotions, and they can be positive or negative. So it could be things like motivation, self-confidence, anxiety. These are all a part of a learner's affect. And a learner's affect will affect their ability to process input. So we have input coming to us in a second language, and we can either receive that input, use it to process language and acquire more language competence, or we might have that filter up and then the input is not reaching us. So we're going to talk about how does that affective filter connect to language learning specifically.
So here are some wonderful visuals from a teacher in the field. Her name's Valentina Gonzalez. And so this really it helps to put a visual to what happens when learners are experiencing a high affective filter when they are learning a language. So factors that can increase our affective filter, which I saw some of these things in the chat, like stress, fear of making mistakes, maybe having a lot of error correction, maybe not strategically done. These are all things that can lead to a high affective filter, as we can see with the brick wall. And as Johanna had mentioned, this impedes our language learning. That wall goes up and our students aren't able to process the language and, learn effectively. So what are some ways that we can lower that affective filter? We can create a welcome and supportive environment. We can do different things to make our students feel comfortable in the classroom to lower that affective filter so that they can effectively learn.
You need to put on your microphone, I think, Laura.
Thank you. So Chelsea has talked about how a high affective filter keeps students from being able to receive the input that we are giving them, while a low effective filter allows students to receive the input and allows them to be ready to learn. So we're going to show you some pictures, and I want you to type in the chat whether you think the students in the picture have a high affective filter or a low affective filter. And we'll give you just a few seconds. Do the students have a high affective filter or a low affective filter? So in this picture, the students actually have a low affective filter. Johanna, can you give me a click, please? Oops. So the low affective filter means that that wall in between the students and the teacher is low so that they are able to learn. So the students in this picture have a low affective filter. Let's look at the next picture, please, Johanna. All right. Does this student have a high affective filter? Or that the high filter means that the student is not very ready or able to learn because they are stressed out or they are worried, they are not ready to learn. If the student has a low affective filter, that means that the wall is low and they are ready to learn. In this picture, the student has a high affective filter. Their wall is up and they are not able to receive the input that the teacher is giving them right now. Let's look at another picture, please. So this student is working with the teacher. Does this student have a high affective filter or a low affective filter? The student looks very stressed out, very frustrated. Yes, I'm seeing some answers coming in. Good job, guys. Excellent. Yes, so this student does have a high affective filter. That wall, you can imagine a wall between him and his teacher right now, and he is frustrated, so he is not able to learn. I think we have one more picture to look at. All right, let's look at these students. They're smiling, they're raising their hands to join, to answer the questions that the teacher is giving them. Is their affective filter high or low? Yes, excellent. Thank you, Harriet. The affective filter is low for these students. They are happy, they are ready. All right. Thank you, Johanna.
Yes. And now we're going to think about some ways that we can lower the affective filter. Our goal is for students to have a low affective filter. If their filter is low, they're receiving the input that teachers are providing them or that the text is providing them, and they're able to absorb the information, process the information, and use it for their own language acquisition. So physical space is one way we can think about that. The question we have is, do you teach in your own classroom or do you share your classroom with other teachers? So this is just something that's kind of a cultural difference for us in terms of physical space. In the United States, a lot of teachers have their own class where students come into the room and then they go to the next class. So you get to kind of control your physical space more. How about you all? Do you have your own classrooms or are you sharing it with other teachers and kind of not having a lot of control over the space? So
I can say, Johanna, that in my school district, a lot of teachers go into other teachers' classrooms. So they don't necessarily have their own classroom. Sometimes they have a cart that they keep everything that they need on, and they push their cart from classroom to classroom. So even within the United States, we have differences in how our classrooms work.
For sure. So I see some people are saying that they share a classroom. Some people have their own classroom, and one person teaches only one-on-one, which would also be a different type of setting. So that's just something to keep in mind when we talk about physical space, because it'll kind of affect how much you can control. But here are some considerations for physical space. First of all is seating arranged so that students can communicate with each other. Second, are there visuals that support the language learning goal? And third, are there written directions that support the upcoming task? So we're going to talk about each of these things in more depth. For seating, we have an image here of some different seating arrangements. And the main idea with seating is that your seating should ideally match the task that you're doing. So there's the traditional seating of students in rows and columns, and that's the most appropriate for tasks like exams or quizzes when students are going to be working by themselves. We also have seating arrangements like the round table or the horseshoe, and this seating can help support classroom discussions because students can see each other and make eye contact and hear better. And then we have seating arrangements like pods. There's different types of pods, group pods and pair pods, and that works better for small group discussions, think, pair, share, things like that. Even if you don't have your own classroom, you can help students learn how to set up the seating in different ways quickly so that they're most they're in the best situation for the tasks that you want them to do. And this is a routine that you can practice with students so that it goes quickly and smoothly, so we don't have to deal with classroom management. And the thing to consider for this one in terms of affective filter is that communication is motivating for children. So if they have a chance to communicate, their motivation is going to go up, and that can lower their affective filter. The second idea is visuals. So we all know as language teachers that visuals are important to help students see what you mean. They can also help students build independence, because instead of having to get a translation of something or ask a question, they can again see what you're saying, and they allow time for language processing. So as we're speaking, we're also using visuals as a way to help them understand what we're talking about. So obviously images that support language are super important to help with giving them that support. And then also anchor charts or slides. The reason why I have both of those in here is because if you're not in your own classroom, slides might work better, because then it's connected to your computer and you can bring it with you. If you do have your own classroom, then charts or papers on the wall that have different language supports is super helpful for students. So you could have charts or slides with the target vocabulary, with target language structures, any routines or strategies that they do on a regular basis, schedules or rubrics so that they know what to expect. And all of these types of visuals are going to help increase their confidence, that they know what they're supposed to be saying, what vocabulary they're supposed to use, what grammar they're supposed to use, and also what they're supposed to be doing, which will decrease their anxiety. So these will definitely help lower the filter for your students. And then the last topic, and this is more of a specific strategy in terms of a visual, is written directions that support an upcoming task. And in my school district in Minneapolis, we have a special program called Catalyst, and Catalyst calls this an exit direction. It doesn't mean that students are leaving the class. This is actually when they're being released to do work either on their own or in a group. So the teacher has finished explaining what they're supposed to do, and now it's time for them to transition to work time. So when we do exit directions, what we're trying to do is explain in writing all the steps that we're also saying out loud. So it's a written direction that reinforces the steps of an upcoming task. In these directions, we also want to make sure that there's visual cues so that they are understanding what we're talking about, and it kind of triggers an idea of, oh yeah, that's when we talk about, is it by myself or with a partner or something like that. And then also it's something that they can reference throughout the work time. So it's going to help with that transition to work time because they're going to understand it. It's going to help with kids who are not paying attention or they didn't catch everything. And it's going to help in terms of just keeping us all in a better mood, because I'm sure we've all had that situation where we've just finished explaining what to do and then someone raises their hand and asks, what are we doing? So instead of feeling frustrated or having to re-explain, you can use your written directions as a way to reinforce the steps. Notice in these two examples that they both have kind of a structure to them. So the first one says, what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? Where does it go when you're finished? And then also it has a finished question mark. So it has something that students can do if they finish early. So you don't have students coming up to you and asking, what do I do next? Same thing with the second chart. It says, what do you need? What should you do? Where do you put it? And then what? So if you finish early, there's another idea of what to do. So all of these, this exit direction strategy of writing out your directions for the next task is really going to help increase their confidence and decrease their anxiety because they have another way to access that information. And that will bring us to routines.
Yes, and so that sets up routines very well because practicing the strategies like that, like having the exit directions where students know what to expect and have a predictable structure is really important to maximize our instructional time. But first, I would like to ask, what are some activities that you use regularly, maybe daily or weekly in the classroom? So maybe just write in the chat an activity you do on a regular basis. So for example, I'm going to show a little more about this, but an example would be warm-up writing, having your students start the day with a writing prompt and doing warm-up writing first thing. Okay, so I see songs and karaoke. It's a great engaging activity. Information gaps, spotting the difference, also a good one. Good afternoon, Catherine. Yes, so any other activities that we like to do on a regular basis? Okay, so I'm going to keep going though. So routines. Routines help to provide a predictable structure for our students, and this is really important to establish good routines and to practice these routines with our students at all different levels. If we're teaching primary, secondary, higher education, having routines in place really helps to take away some ambiguity and make sure it gives us more opportunities to practice the language in the language classroom. So routines provide predictable structures to maximize that instructional time. We're not wasting time or spending needless time explaining if we have a routine and students know what to expect. So this maximizes our time to get into the deep stuff, to do some critical thinking. So that in turn lowers the affective filter because students, again, they know what to expect. So this also increases student engagement and boosts their confidence. They can participate more actively, and by being able to anticipate, they can participate. So here are two examples of some routines that I do in my classroom. These templates come from another educator named Miss Esther Park. And one of them is, the top one is a check-in activity that I like to do with students. I change the question, but students, in this case, in the virtual classroom, or this could be a projected slide and students have the link. They just answer questions like, if you were an animal, what would you be? And it's just a fun way to get the students talking and to start class. Another activity is a warm-up writing. So, for example, in my own classroom, I felt like I needed more of a routine to get students started and engaged in class right away. So by projecting a writing prompt, and this is something that comes from a writing notebook that they have access to, I was finding that it increased student engagement. Students knew what they had to do right away when they came into class, and they could practice writing. So it was a good routine to establish, to make sure, one, it was a classroom routine. Students knew what to do right when they got to class, and it was an instructional routine because they were practicing writing daily. Okay, so routines, they establish clear expectations, like I was alluding to. Students know what is expected of them during different periods of the day, whether that be classroom routines like beginning of class. They know that they should expect some sort of welcome and a posting of the language target or objective of the day, an agenda, and also there are routines that you can put in place so students know what to do during transition times. They listen for a phrase. I know at the primary level, they listen for a phrase that maybe teachers say to get their attention. So these are all examples of classroom routines that also optimizes our instructional time. So routines allow for repetition. Naturally, if we are doing warm-up writing every day, students are exposed to, practicing output in writing. So it's repeated opportunities for students to practice the target content and in multiple modalities. Another positive of routines is opportunities to regularly check in with students informally or formatively. You could do an activity like the one at the top, a quick finger check-in to see how students understood the content or how they're feeling after a certain activity. So if students know like that they're going to do some sort of check-in after an activity, this is a good way for you to gauge their understanding. Another one is exit tickets. So having students at the end of a class period reflect on their learning and a different way. Maybe instead of doing the finger kinesthetic, they're writing an exit ticket. And then lastly, some further examples of instructional routines that you can implement right away in your classroom. And I'm sure many of you already do these. Bell ringers. So I'm not sure if bells are as ubiquitous in other school contexts, but in the US in secondary primary education, bells still notify that a class begins. So we say bell ringers as a warm-up type activity. So warm up writing, you could do a review game. There's also social emotional check-ins, like with my warm up writing on the previous slide, having emojis to check in how students are feeling. Sustained reading time. So having independent reading time every day is a really important thing to do. You could do grammar and vocabulary activities. Theme task. Somebody put in the chat about karaoke and singing. So having a music Monday or a meme Monday, and also the last exit tickets. So I'll end with an example that sorry, can we go back 1 second? This is an activity from New York Times. You may have seen this. It's an activity called What's Going On in This Picture? So if you haven't used this, feel free. It's a really engaging activity. It starts basically at the beginning of the week. Students can look at an image and try to predict and work cooperatively to decide what's going on in this picture. And then by the end of the week, they are going to write in on a discussion board, and then there's a reveal to find out what's the description, what's going on in this photo. So that is an example.
Okay, so that brings us to classroom climate. So I want to start with a question. Remember, we talked about the affective filter. If your affective filter is high, you're not ready to learn. It's like a wall is up around you. If your affective filter is low, then you are ready to learn and engage with the input that you're receiving. So I want you to think back to your favorite class in school. What were some of the things that your teacher did that made you feel comfortable and ready to learn? What did your teacher do to lower your affective filter? We'll give you a moment to type some ideas in the chat. How did your teacher, your favorite class, what did the teacher do that made you feel comfortable and ready to learn? How did your teacher lower your affective filter? Oh, Matilda says her smile. I think that's one of the simplest ways that we can make our students feel welcome is to smile at them. Singing, says Harriet. So I'm not a singing teacher. I think that would make my students' affective filter go up if I tried singing to them. But if you have a nice voice, that could make their affective filter go lower. I've also used recorded music in the classroom to help lower the affective filter, especially when students are working. So I'm seeing some great answers. There are a lot of things that we can do as teachers to help lower the affective filter for our students. Johanna, can you go to the next slide? So you may be wondering, what is classroom climate? When we talk about the climate in the classroom, we're talking about our students' overall, the emotional and social atmosphere within the learning environment and how that works to create a climate of learning in the classroom. So there are 4 characteristics of a positive classroom climate that I'm going to talk about. And I'll go into detail about each one of these. So a positive classroom climate, one, the teacher encourages mutual respect for others. So respect between students, respect between teacher and students. It's a classroom where the teacher cultivates collaboration between students. And finally, it's a classroom where the teacher fosters a growth mindset. Johanna, could you go on to the next one, please? So an environment of mutual respect helps reduce the fear of making mistakes, because sometimes our students are afraid of getting laughed at by other students. But if we have built an environment, a climate of mutual respect, then students don't have to worry about being laughed at, and they have a lower fear of making mistakes. This then encourages them to take risks with the language. A few strategies is first begin by modeling respectful communication and active listening in your classroom. And what does respectful communication look like? What does active listening look like? Again, setting clear expectations for respectful behavior. What constitutes respectful behavior and what is absolutely not respectable or respectful behavior. And then finally, providing our students constructive feedback with kindness. And when I say feedback, I'm not talking about just saying good job. We need to give our students feedback that helps them understand the areas that they need to improve in. So providing that leads us right into the next one, which is providing support and feedback. These are a really important part of your classroom environment, because getting support and feedback from the teacher helps increase the student confidence and motivation. The feedback that we give can provide guidance to our students for the areas in which they need to develop further. It helps them recognize what they're really good at, what their strengths are, and then areas that they need maybe a little bit more work in. The support and feedback that we provide also helps reduce frustration and anxiety in language learning, which again lowers that affective filter. It brings that wall between the teacher and the student down. And then finally, providing support and feedback helps to encourage that growth mindset that I talked about a moment ago. And we're gonna talk about that more in a second. Johanna, can you go? Thank you. So effective teacher support and feedback, like I said a moment ago, it's not saying good job and moving on. To provide effective support and feedback to students, we need to clear, specific, and again, constructive feedback. We need to use a balance of praise and guidance for improvement. And finally, it's also really important to provide our students with opportunities to do self-assessment and to reflect on their own learning. We also need to be providing effective support and feedback so that our students feel comfortable asking for help. We also want to be able to reinforce their progress and again, build up that confidence. We want to lower that affective filter by building up their confidence. And then finally, as teachers, it's our job to provide scaffolds to help them use the language and to differentiate the supports that we provide them as we need to. Next, please. Cultivating collaboration, that's the third thing that I mentioned before. So cultivating a climate of collaboration, this helps increase our students' motivation and their participation. Collaborating with others also encourages students to use the language in authentic contexts, and it helps develop communication and problem-solving skills at the same time. Next, please. So some strategies that you can use to cultivate collaboration in your classroom is to begin by using pair and group activities to get students interacting with one another. When you have students working together in pairs or groups, you want to make sure that you're setting clear expectations for how they're working together in teams. Giving them specific roles can really help that. So one person is recording information, maybe another person is getting supplies. So each person has a role that they have to fill within the group. And then making sure that we're being intentional about incorporating cooperative learning strategies such as think, pair, share, jigsaw, and many others. Next, please. So you can also cultivate a collaborative climate by creating tasks that require negotiation between students and shared decision making. And then finally, and maybe most important, is ensuring that you're fostering a classroom where all the contributions from our students are valued. And again, that goes back to that establishing mutual respect between students and between teacher and students. Next, please. So finally, I mentioned fostering a growth mindset. So what is a growth mindset? It's the belief that our intelligence and our abilities can be developed over time and through effort, through intentional learning, and through perseverance. So people who have a growth mindset, instead of viewing, they view it as an opportunity to grow. With a growth mindset, we believe that practice, dedication, effort are just as important or more important than talent, and that we can improve our skills, we can overcome our obstacles, and that leads overall to a more positive attitude towards learning and personal development. So really the view that effort over talent is really kind of what growth mindset is about. A person with a fixed mindset is kind of just like, I can't do it. I don't know how to do it. They don't really think about how to overcome the challenges or obstacles that are in front of them. Next, please. So why is a growth mindset important? I think it's important in every classroom, but especially in our language classrooms. That growth mindset is important because it encourages resilience and persistence in learning. Instead of feeling, downtrodden that they got something wrong, if they view it as an opportunity to learn, then they're going to keep on going. The growth mindset also helps their students view challenges as opportunities for fear and failure that we talked about before, that some people mentioned in the chat, and it helps promote the risk-taking that is so important in language learning. Next, please. So also a growth mindset helps promote a positive attitude towards mistakes, and it builds that self-confidence and motivation to keep learning, to keep improving. Next, please. So some ways that you can foster a growth mindset in your own classroom. First and foremost, celebrate effort and progress and not just accuracy. Sometimes we as teachers, especially as language teachers, we get stuck on accuracy, but it's really important to celebrate how far our students have come and the progress that they're making. It's also important to emphasize to our students that language learning is a process. We may take some steps forward and then take some steps back and then go forward again. It's a process. So we want to emphasize that to our students. It's not a straight line. And then finally, encouraging students to set personal goals and track improvement. And that goes back to what I mentioned before about about self-reflection and self-assessment. So those are some ways that you can foster. You can also use language in your classroom that highlights growth. So instead of "that's right," maybe try "you are getting better at this." Again, we're normalizing mistakes and we're discussing them as part of the language learning journey. I can tell you that some of the most memorable words in my Spanish vocabulary are there because I made a mistake, and that mistake has helped me remember that word forever after. So, normalize that our mistakes are part of the way that we learn language. And then going back to what I mentioned a moment ago, providing that constructive feedback that focuses on how they can improve next time. So instead of just "good job," "great work," we want to give them specific feedback that tells them what they need to do to improve. Next, please. And that brings us to our last question. What is one idea from this webinar that you would like to try in your classroom this year? So take a moment, think about it, and write your answer in the chat for us. What is one idea from the webinar that we shared tonight that you will try in your classroom this year?
Aliberto is going to do everything. Thank you, Aliberto. That's ambitious.
Yay! What are some ideas from this webinar that you will try in your classroom this year?
So Julia says maybe
Oh, I
providing.
love that. Julia, I'm going to.
No, go ahead.
Oh, so Julia said, I'm going to work in saying more than "that's good, well done." I like it. Remember that specific constructive feedback that tells them what they need to do to improve.
I see different warm-up activities. Awesome.
Anybody else want to share an idea from this webinar that you will try in your classroom this year? We love hearing what you're taking away from this. Ooh, valuing my students' contributions. I love that. Yeah, it's so important that we make our students feel that their contributions are valuable and that every contribution is valuable as well. Making our students feel more confident and eager to continue learning. That's fostering that growth mindset, lowering the affective filter so that they're comfortable and ready to learn. I love that. I will improve feedback and smiling. I like that. What's going on in our day? We're busy. We've got lots to accomplish. And we forget to smile. It happens. But smiling at our students can make their day. So those are some great responses. We really appreciate you guys joining us this evening or this afternoon for the webinar. You are welcome to join us at 3 p.m. For a post-webinar discussion. We have the bit link here on the screen for you. You can also use the QR code to access our webinar chat. So thank you again for joining us.
Thank you for your participation.
Thanks, everyone.